Hello. Before we start the show, we'd like to give a shout out to Weather Rich, who gave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you, Rich. And now on with the show.
You're listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and have your work build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.
Hello and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Today our guest is Chris Smith, the author of Walt Disney World That Never Was. Chris is a father and he's from Alabama, and he's been to Walt Disney World dozens of times. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Matt and Leah, for having me. It's my pleasure to be on, and I know this is going to be a whole lot of fun.
So, Chris, tell us about your book. You must be a big fan of Disney World.
Yes, absolutely. People who visit Walt Disney World, I think they fall into a couple of different categories. One are the normal people who just go down for family trips and enjoy the resort and the park and the rides for what and have the people like me who are a little more obsessed with it and look above and beyond just the experiences themselves and try to study the history and the backstories and all the fun facts and things and the stories that surround everything that Disney does down at Walt Disney World in Orlando.
So tell us a little bit about the book. Tell us about what it means, that the Disney that never was.
Sure. So, Walt Disney World is, for people who aren't that familiar with it, it really is kind of a city unto itself. It's approximately the size of Manhattan and is, filled with different theme parks and, hundreds of attractions and experiences. And the park originally opened back in 1971. And so over the course of that 40 plus years, just tons of brilliant different experiences and buildings and attractions that have been put into place down there. But what got me excited and really what my book is about is that, over the course of that time period, Disney's, they're called Imagineers, which is a combination of imagination and engineers, and it's essentially used to describe all of the different artists and engineers and people who create these brilliant attractions. But over the course of those 40 plus years, most people don't know that there have been tons of brilliant concepts dreamed up by these amazingly talented people that just never came to be in the parks. And what I decided to do is kind of take a look at those different attractions and concepts, these very grand plans and experiences, and find out why they never came to be in the parks. In other words, what was the story that we didn't get these wonderful rides that we can read about in some of the marketing materials and some of the corporate disclosures that the Disney company puts out.
Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. I wouldn't even have thought about that. So what made you think about it? Did you?
Yeah, and this is, oh boy, when you ask me that, I have to. It makes me admit what kind of a Disney nerd that I am. And I know I told you both this before we started recording, but by day I'm an attorney in Huntsville, Alabama, and I do corporate and securities work. And so, as a part of my Disney obsession, if you will, I started to collect these different things about the Disney company, and one of the things I started collecting were annual shareholder reports that the Disney company puts out, which probably tells you how exciting my but what those documents are, for those who don't know, is it's essentially a disclosure about the company's operations for the preceding year, and then looks ahead to different things the company wants to do in the future. And what was interesting to me is that when I got my hands on some of these old reports from the 60s and the 70s, I would read about these grand plans for these attractions and these hotels and these wonderful ideas. and you would even see these beautiful artistic renderings in these corporate documents that I knew from my many trips to Disney World never ended up happening. And so that really sparked a curiosity inside me to dig a little deeper and find out why those attractions and concepts never made it off the drawing boards and into the parks. And what I discovered is that really, and I'm also I have a history undergraduate degree, really the book is more about the history of the Disney company and the company's response and reactions to different external factors like economic pressures or world events or even Walt Disney's own death, and how their reaction and response to those affected the attractions that we did end up getting in the parks and those that ended up being shelved, unfortunately, for good.
That sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
So you interviewed people who worked for Disney, and was Disney okay with that, the Disney Corporation?
Yes, and so the research, goodness gracious, this was my first book, so I'm a first-time writer. But one thing I felt pretty good about, just from my background as an attorney, was research, and so I poured myself into this research, and it involved tons of old corporate disclosures and corporate documents, a lot of early marketing materials, talking with some retired Imagineers, getting those firsthand accounts, and really, just kind of trying to get my arms around the full scope of this project, which I'll just tell you, Matt and Leah, was so much broader than I ever could have imagined when I first kind of headed down this path. But everybody was very cooperative, and actually, it's interesting. Instead of not wanting to talk about some of these concepts that never happened, a lot of these folks kind of jumped at the opportunity to do that, because in a lot of ways these projects were near and dear to their hearts, and it's kind of a sore spot for them that they never actually do those.
Yeah, I guess they spent much time and put a lot of effort in it, and then if it doesn't go through, it has to be disappointing.
That's right, and I'll tell you this too. 'Cause one of the questions I get asked a lot is that people tend to have the knee-jerk reaction that if a particular idea never made it off the drawing board and into the parks, then it must have not been that great of an idea in the first place. And the reality is, it's actually the opposite. Most of these concepts were so amazing and so grand in scope that they also carried with them a very large price tag. And so one of the primary reasons that a lot of these things never happened is that they were just so darn expensive. It was too expensive to make them happen. And that's why you hear about these amazing ideas, and man, for me, really wish that some of these could have been brought into the parks.
Yeah.
So after you did all the research and you began writing, did you hire a copy editor?
Not initially. So the way the process worked for me is I've loved books since I was a child. I've always been just a very avid reader, and had always thought, one day I would really like to take that step and write a book, and just kind of put it off. And when I kind of thought about this idea, I talked to my wife, and I thought, I'd really, really like to do this. And she certainly encouraged me to head down that path. And so what I did was, along with the other things that I have a lot of Disney-wise, I also have a lot of books. And so I kind of went to my bookshelf and started pulling off these books and looking at the publishing companies. And one
idea.
yeah, and what was interesting, what I found was, it's interesting how when you buy these books and you don't pay attention to it. I had bought a lot of books from one particular company called Theme Park Press, and they are a press that specializes in theme park books, including the Disney company.
Oh.
And so I sent an email with my idea to who turned out to be my editor, Bob McLean, and Bob responded back, told me that he thought it was a great idea. How far along was I in writing? And I had to come clean and tell him that, well, I've done a lot of research. I have done very little writing. And he gave me the best advice that anybody's ever given me. And he said, well, you better get started. And I did exactly that. I wish I could say that there was a particular science to the process, but I tried to, I had an idea in my mind about how I wanted the book to be structured, and so I put together an outline and chapters that I thought I would cover, and different groupings of ideas, and organized my research to correspond with that, and just started writing. And certainly, as I got further into these different ideas and things, the book itself kind of morphed and evolved, and would bounce ideas off my editor and get his input, and he certainly helped me along the way. But it was probably not the most efficient of processes, but it helped me kind of. It gave me a whole new appreciation for writers and actually create something. There were points of time I didn't think I was going to get it finished, but
yeah, that's what we're going to ask. Were there any roadblocks, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Leah. And really, I think the first major roadblock was just time. I'm an attorney by day, which is a very time-intensive occupation, and then of course, have my wife, and then we have 3 children under the age of 4.
Whoa!
And you still found time to write a book.
Wow.
Well, it's just there's unfortunately there's only 24 hours in the day, and really what ended up happening was I just had to. And my wife and I had a long conversation about this before I began, and she was such a great teammate in letting me do this, because the unfortunate result was a lot of time had to be sacrificed, and she had to take on more of the household duties than she should have, but supported me 110%. And so I would be up all hours of the night doing research and doing writing and revisions. But, it got to a point where I could see the finish line, and I had agreed on a date to submit the manuscript with my editor, and it got to a point, and this is a subject that I love, and I love the Walt Disney World, and I love the Disney Company. It got to a point where I wasn't having fun writing anymore, and so what I decided to do is I talked to my editor and I said, listen, I just, I know we agreed on this timeline. I need to just take a couple of weeks to step away and catch my breath. And he was completely supportive of that. I did it, came back with the energy I needed to finish it up, and then submit it. But really it was just the time aspect was the biggest hurdle. I'll just tell you too, in my day-to-day practice, I spend a lot of time working on contracts, and I always tell our younger attorneys that I can review a contract 100 times and still find things that I think need to be improved.
Okay.
Unfortunately, my book manuscript was the same way.
Uh-huh.
Every time I would read through, I would find more things that I wanted to change and tweak and modify, and eventually I just had to get to that point where, okay, I've got to let it go. Mm-hmm. I've got to let someone else take a look at it and help me get it to where it needs to be. And Bob McLean, I tell you what, I can't speak any more highly of him, because he helped me so much in taking whatever it was I gave him into refining and doing some back and forths and getting it to where it was a product that I was very proud of and am very proud of today.
Well, it's nice to hear that you had so much support. That's wonderful.
I was just going to say there's some good takeaways there. If you feel overwhelmed, ask for and take a break. And after you've worked on it for so long, eventually you just have to publish it. You have to put it out for people to read. You could correct it forever, but at one point you just have to say enough and I'm finished.
Absolutely. And those were difficult things to actually do. Obviously it makes sense in concept, but when it comes to actually doing it, oh my goodness! I probably sound silly, but I typed up the email, attached the manuscript, and literally, had to just sit there and wait for a couple of minutes before I could press send, and finally did it. And thank goodness, otherwise I could have spent, another month just reading back over and over again.
Now, your book was just published, right?
That's right. So it was just released 1st of November, so just a little over a month ago. And I'll tell you both. I mean,
congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you very much. In my day-to-day practice, I've gotten to work on some amazing deals and some exciting things. I don't know that I've ever been more excited than the day I got a finished copy of the book, or the day that it was put on Amazon.
Yeah.
Such a cool experience.
I bet you for your family also.
Oh, it really was. My wife, we're on Facebook and Twitter and that kind of stuff, and I had kind of kept what I was doing quiet from a lot of my friends, just because there's always that fear that you're never actually going to get it done.
Right. Or someone saying, no,
you'll never be successful with that, right?
That's exactly.
And you don't need that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'd kept it quiet, and then once we got the hard copy, my wife set out on a one-woman social media book, and it was a lot of fun. It's been a lot of great feedback from family and friends, and the book is actually done really well to start out. And so it's just one of those things that I always thought I really like to write a book in my lifetime, and to actually get that done, and for folks to have a positive reception to it, that just means a whole lot to me.
Yeah, I bet.
I bet it was pretty exciting the first time you saw it in a bookstore, and you went in and you actually picked it up and held it, and you saw it was for sale.
Yeah, it's it really, it's kind of a surreal experience, and I think I told you this before. I've been just an avid book reader my entire life, and to actually say now that I can, we have a small room in our house that we call a library, but it's really just a small room with a lot of shelves that we have all of our books in, because my wife is an avid reader also. To now to be able to take mine and put it up there on the shelf too, I mean, that's
that is
I don't care who you are.
That's cool.
That's very cool. So what are you doing to market the book, Chris?
Yeah, so it's really, that's been kind of the, just another learning piece for me. I have reached out. Certainly, it's a book. It's a history book, but it's obviously targeted towards those who are like me and who have a love for Walt Disney World. And so I have reached out to numerous podcasts that kind of cover Walt Disney World in depth, and have done a lot of those. Another one of my side hobbies has been to write monthly articles for a Disney magazine.
Oh.
And so I reached out to the publisher of the magazine and talked with him, and he was gracious enough to put an advertisement for the book in his magazine, and I've done just a lot of social media stuff also. And we're actually, now that the book's been out for a little over a month, we're kind of getting some events for the local bookstores here in Huntsville, Alabama, where I'm located, set up and going. So it's cool. It has been a really fun process, because it's for me to get the chance to get on with folks like the two of you and talk about it. Man, that may be the funnest part of this whole thing.
Yeah, so we heard about you from our friends Bob and Tim, who do a podcast called The Resort Loop. And
yes.
Yeah.
Now, Bob and I'll tell you what, those guys are cut from the same cloth that I am.
They are a lot of fun.
They are, and I told them, I said, guys, getting an attorney on a Disney podcast talking about a Disney book he has written, you may have to cut me off after 2 hours, because I'll just keep going forever. But those guys were fantastic. Have a wonderful podcast that really, and I'll tell you what has been really just a very fun part of this for me is that these Disney podcasts that I've done are podcasts that I've listened to for years and have been a big fan of, including Resort Loop. And to get the opportunity to actually go on those podcasts and talk to the guys and the girls that I've listened to for so long, that has just been a very fun, a very rewarding experience for me.
You're part of it.
Right.
Yeah, that's fun.
It's kind of getting to meet someone famous, like on the Today Show when they're doing the weather and those people get to meet Al Roker outside.
We'll plug that. our friends are famous. Yeah.
Yeah. Tim and Bob are famous.
Yeah. I tell my wife. My wife is a big Disney fan, but she and we take our kids down a lot. But she's not reading through old Disney shareholder reports in her spare time. But she jokes with me now that now I'm a quote unquote Disney expert because I'm on a subject, and I was like, you know what? That's you're saying that to make fun of me, but in my book, that's pun intended. That's a good thing.
Mm. Yeah, especially when you know all about the contracts and you can actually read them and know what they're saying. That's excellent. So, what's the best way to buy your book?
Sure. So people can get the book on Amazon, The Walt Disney World That Never Was, or they can visit my publisher's website, Theme Park Press. That site not only has my book, but just a ton of other fun books about Disney World and other theme parks, which, as I told you both, graced my bookshelves long before I decided to ever try and write a book on my own.
Okay, well, we'll put a link to those on our webpage.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Sure. Well, thanks, Chris, for being a guest on the Author Inside You podcast. I have just 2 more questions. So what's the best advice you can give fellow authors who happen to be listening, and how can they get in touch with you?
The best way to get me is at Twitter, and they can reach me at Disney, DISNEY, Kid, KID, again, AGAIN, Disney Kid again.
Thank you.
And the reason I use that name is that after all these trips to Walt Disney World, I've discovered what luckily a lot of other people have discovered, which is Disney's more than just bricks and mortar and hamburgers and hot dogs. It's truly a magical place where even adult corporate attorneys like me can become kids again. And really, the one piece of advice I would give is, number one, write about something that you are passionate about, because what I discovered is the amount of time and research and effort it takes. You definitely want to have that passion when you're spending that much time. And then number two is just keep writing. I did, like I said before, hit a point where I needed to take a break, but otherwise I made sure that even if it was for only 30 minutes after a long day, that I did keep going and keep writing, and just keep pushing ahead.
Right. Those are both good examples. Good advice.
I'm sure there could be a lot better advice, but it was very much a learning experience for me, and I certainly hope to write more books in the future. But this first time was certainly a big learning experience.
Yeah, that's wonderful that you're planning on writing more books. That's great.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks again, Chris, and thanks for listening to the Author Inside You podcast. And until next time, write on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.